Hello and welcome back to the MatchDay Review Podcast with myself, Aidan Christer, and I'm always joined by Lewis Hall. And for the first time in a very, very long time, we have just watched a game of football. It was Borussia Dortmund versus Schalke. It was the return of football in Europe, in European major leagues. There were no fans there, but it was football. And it felt good to be watching the game of football again. I don't know about you.
Oh yeah, it's back to that Saturday afternoon ritual of watching a game of football at 2:30, 3 o'clock. Granted, the 2:30 kickoff's a bit weird, but we're in new uncertain times. And it's just refreshing to be able to watch football and watch some of the best operators that the game has at the moment ply their trade on a football field.
Yeah, it was good. It was just nice to, have almost like a schedule in a case of it's 2 o'clock or 2:30, to get everything done by the day. Get your shopping out of the way, come back down and sit and watch some football for a little bit.
You say about having a schedule, we still both forgot to do Super 6 this weekend.
But that wasn't because it was a lack of schedule. I didn't know it was on. I didn't know if they were going to do it for the Bundesliga, because obviously normally it's for Premier League and the occasional Champions League round they do it for, but I didn't know. So next week I'll be on top of it.
Yeah, we still want to win anyway, because we could have put Dortmund to win 4-0 on the Super 6 and Schalke somehow would have turned in a performance and won 1-0.
Actually, I having just watched the game, there was no chance of Schalke scoring a goal in that game, even if we had predicted otherwise.
No, you said it was good to watch football and have football back on a Saturday afternoon, but we only really watched one team play football. The other team was just there for the beating.
Yeah, and we mentioned this when we were talking briefly about behind closed doors games when we had that spell of Champions League games with nobody there. And the lack of fans in the atmosphere in the stadium makes it feel like you're watching really, really good Sunday League teams. But the only problem with that is then when there is one team clearly better than the other, there's almost no outside influence to get them going for it.
Yeah, it was surreal at the start, and you could sense both sets of players. Particularly, I was watching Mats Hummels at centre half for Borussia Dortmund, and everybody was a bit tentative, and it was all a bit surreal in terms of, oh, this doesn't feel right, something feels really off here, and that's because you wasn't getting the full experience of the fans being in the stadium, but it's just something we've all got to get used to, and Dortmund dealt with it pretty quickly, got it out of the system, and we're back into playing quick, one-touch, incisive football, and they were knocking triangles around the midfield of Schalke, which, granted, when you got David Wagner playing two low-sitting, holding midfielders to try and nullify Dortmund, you're kind of setting yourself up to get battered, in my opinion. Yeah,
it did kind of take 20 minutes, I think, for the game to almost not find its rhythm, but to almost kick into gear and kind of think, right, we've tested the waters a little bit, we've get the ball around, we've made some runs, done that, and then realised that actually it's a game of football to be played here.
Yeah, it's knocking the rust off.
Yeah, because these players have had, I know they've been back in training for a little bit, but it's different training, it's in small groups. They've been off for a good 8 weeks as well. So this is almost, and that's without likening it to starting a season again. But this is without pre-season tours and full-on intense training camps that they usually go through at the start of the season.
Well, for me, it's the longest layoff any footballer I've had since he was 6 or 7. Particularly if he made it to become a professional in the Bundesliga, and because in summer you might have a week, 10 days off after the end of the season. If you're in the Champions League final, you'll have 10 days after that. Then you'll go and play your June internationals or be getting ready for a tournament, be that the Euros or the World Cup. And once that's over, you go and have a 2-week holiday, and then you're straight back into it because of the start of the season. Then no one's ever really had 66 to 70 days off without kicking a ball in anger, both in training or in a game.
Yeah, and I think Dortmund definitely dealt with that far better than Schalke did. Schalke didn't really look like they were up for the fight at all for the entirety of that game.
It was, I don't know what to say about Schalke. It was just a completely abject performance that you couldn't really blame on the conditions or the lack of training or what the situation's been for the past 8 to 10 weeks. It was as though the team was devoid of quality and devoid of any incisive attacking creativity. There was no goal threat. not one player in that Schalke team carried any goal threat. I don't know what you think, but for me, outside of Rabbi Matondo's jiggling run at the edge of the box in the second half before Mats Hummels tackled him with an excellent tackle, and then Matondo went through the back of Ashraf Hakimi, and then when he made that point, then
it was good. It'd seen Hummels do it and go, oh, that can't be that difficult, and then got it.
It was like the referee was resigned to giving him a yellow card.
Take that. You tried, but no.
Yeah, and it was in the first half. Dennis Cagliari got the ball presented to him on the edge of the 6-yard box. He had to have 4 stabs at it before Roman Burki just covered it up as a goalkeeper for Dortmund. And that was the closest that Schalke came to any point of scoring a goal against this Dortmund team. And really, for me, at the back, weren't 100% efficient, nor were they completely in gear, although they never were tested.
Yeah, I think they didn't need to get out of gear, really, but you mentioned they weren't really tested. But, I mean, going forward, we say that Schalke are a bit abject all over the pitch, but Dortmund didn't really have to try all that hard going forward. They only seemed to they turned it on in spurts, and then every time they turned it on, they seemed to score.
Yeah, well, they had 4 shots on target and 4 goals after 78 minutes. And granted, the keeper might as well have not been there for Schalke with the performance that he put in. But you say it was like a hot knife through butter. There was no resistance at the back. There was no organisation with the back 4. Highlighted when Rafael Guerreiro scored the 4th goal. Phenomenal finish and a phenomenal flick around the corner from Erling Haaland for that goal. But John Joe Kenny is 5 yards behind his back 4, playing them all onside. Because I thought
it was offside.
I thought it was a mile offside.
But that ball seemed to be on all game for Dortmund going forward, whether it was Guerreiro, whose name I still struggle with. I don't know why.
Rafael Guerreiro, I don't know what's so hard about it.
I don't know what's the difference. It's just like one of those things I just can't get over. I can't say his name properly. I don't know why. But whether it was him on the left or even Hakimi on the right, because I remember a chance in the first half where he was put through, he just took too long on the ball before.
Yeah, he should have hit it first time, and he had about 5 touches.
But there always seemed to be that overlap on the wings.
Yeah.
And it was causing problems for Schalke all day long.
And that there goes to my question would be to David Wagner, the Schalke manager. Dortmund set up in a pretty different 3-4-3 formation in the first half, with high wingers / wing backs in Guerreiro and Hakimi on each side. And like you said, the overlap was on every time, whether it was a Kanji or Piszczek just knocking the ball out wide long. And he never even looked to change the tactics that Schalke team. It was, we'll just stick in this rigid block and we don't get beat 6-0.
You mentioned David Wagner there. Could we just quickly open up the file I've got here of things I didn't realise had happened in football? It's quite full at this point, actually. But David Wagner turning up at Schalke was something that I saw him on the touchline and went, hang on, that's David Wagner? Like,
yeah, he's been there a good few months.
I didn't even realise. It must have. I know Schalke aren't doing particularly well in the Bundesliga this year, but it was just I never imagined that someone would get relegated with Huddersfield and end up at Schalke.
Yeah, because you made the point, and I don't know what the listeners' opinion are on this. Just leave us a comment in the comments or hit us on the Twitter or on the comments on MatchDayReview.com. But I don't know what they're thinking. You said that what did David Wagner show with that Huddersfield team in the Premier League, particularly in his final season, that'd make you think, yeah, he's my manager. He's going to go and make this Schalke team a force in the Bundesliga.
Yeah, because we compared them to Norwich this season and Daniel Farke. Because as much as we give Norwich a bit of grief for playing the way they do and not getting any results, there is, I suppose, to the uninitiated, maybe in circles of football, upstairs certainly, there's a chance you can get honeypotted by that kind of football. It looks nice, it's very pleasing, easy on the eye kind of stuff. But you play it in the wrong parts and with the wrong players, that it ends up with you getting beaten, and that could happen. So you could poach Daniel Farke, think play some nice football, but your team ultimately doesn't get the results. Whereas David Wagner wasn't getting the results, and Huddersfield was struggling to score goals.
Yeah, because at least with Norwich you got Timu Pukki up front. There we go. You've got a semblance of someone who's a bit of a goal poacher, and Norwich do get enough goals, particularly in this season's Premier League, given that there's 6 or 7 teams who are quite willing candidates to go down and get relegated to the Championship. But Norwich, you say, play this incisive, beautiful style of football where it's all nice laid off or nice pass here, and they actually create chances and get goals. It's just the other end of the pitch, you can't defend for toffee. With Daniel Farke, someone could make the argument that if he had better players who were tactically more aware, particularly at centre-back and in the full-back positions, who'd be able to defend properly and police a game, there'd be a chance you'd be able to get a very successful team out of his tactics and his philosophy. But with Daniel Wagner, or David Wagner, whatever his name is, that he just showed you nothing at Huddersfield. It was a team that was willingly accepting they were going down even in November.
I think he left
that
halfway
season.
through, didn't he? He left because he didn't want that relegation on his CV, I suppose, and the board let him go in a desperate attempt to get somebody else in. That dude that Sky Sports definitely got wrong. Was it his first game? And they just randomly panned to a dude in the crowd and put the wrong name tag on him.
Yeah. Well, it was some random, effective second coach. I can't remember. It was like some coach plucked out of the back room of some middle of the table Bundesliga side.
And then he didn't fare any better either. But
no, that Huddersfield team wasn't good enough to stay in the Premier League that year. But it's, again, what you say there about the fact he didn't want that relegation to be a mark on his CV. That's another question mark for me for a manager. Because a leader, irrespective if it's going terrible or it's going good, you've got to stay as that stabilising constant. Not, I don't like it now, I'm going to go and see if I can find something better.
Down with this shit.
Doesn't wash with me, that. Yeah.
What did you make of the whole scenario then of football coming back with the fact that there was no fans in box? I've been reading people on Twitter, and it's a dangerous place to jump into, but some people are like, oh, it's not worth watching because there's no fans, football's for the fans. And I get the sentiment that football is for the fans, but if you're a fan of football, you're happy that football is back. Surely that was my thinking behind it, but apparently not everybody shares my view.
I think some of them people are just fishing for arguments and attention, particularly on that platform. But you saw in spurts today, you're not going to get the full effect of that Dortmund team and how incisive they are, so potent and direct as an attacking force. But some of the levels of football that were played today, how stylish they were, how creative they were. The player I want to highlight here is Julian Brandt. Just the flicks around the corner, always making sure he was in space, he was offering an outlet for Mohamed Dahoud. Have I got that right?
Mahmoud Dahoud. It's
Yeah,
just a fun name to say.
That's one that I can't say, so you put that in the Guerrero column. But he was taking up these pockets of space between the back four and the two holding midfielders for Schalke, and he was always at the apex of every one of the attacks that Borussia Dortmund had, and was involved in all the goals in the build-up to the final assist or finish.
Yeah, because I was watching it thinking that once you strip back the fans, you strip back all the drama that usually comes with football and stuff like that, at the minute, what you're going to have is 8 to 9 weeks, however long's left of the season, of raw football, in that the football is only about the game being played on the pitch at this point.
Yeah, and I understand, particularly for me, and I don't know about yourself, Ed, and all the listeners, is I can appreciate this style of football more because there's nothing to distract you or detract from watching the actual technical ability or of what's going on in the field with those players. I feel as though you get a better appreciation for how good these players actually are and the standard they all play at.
Yeah, because I found myself watching it, and I'm not saying that obviously this is, I could do this forever. The when fans get back in the stage and football will obviously be better. But in terms of just watching the game, and there was even a point, I think it would have been about 30 minutes in, where I think Dortmund really starting to kick into gear that I didn't really notice that the fans weren't there. It was a fleeting moment, granted. And it's usually, when the ball's on the ground, you're playing football, I don't really notice. It's when the ball goes out of play or there's a corner or something like that, then you really notice that there's nobody there. And it's a case of you appreciate how good these people actually are. And they actually came across as a bit more human on the pitch than they normally would do, rather than just these objects that you see at the weekend.
There's bits of it for me where I could really get behind it. Like you said, having that greater focus on the technical ability of the players. And after the first 10 minutes, where it was really a bit alien, I was just you was back in the flow and you was watching football, and I have appreciation for football that I don't know if many other people hold, that I could watch football all day long, whether it's on the pitches of a Sunday league or watching Manchester United on a Saturday afternoon. And having it back today has just made you feel a whole lot better. If there's not that boredom on a Saturday afternoon, there's something we can talk about on this podcast, and you feel as though the football world's back moving and there's a sense of normality, even though it was so strange to start off with. And not having fans there really wasn't an issue for me after that first 10 minutes that I highlighted.
Yeah, like I said, there were moments where I didn't notice the lack of fans, and then obviously, especially at the end of the football and whatnot, when Dortmund are clapping the non-existent yellow wall, I think then they're the times you really notice. But I think the word normal there was important, because it kind of made the Saturday feel a bit more normal than it has done for quite a while. Like you said, that structure that we mentioned earlier to your weekend kind of thing. And if the Premier League does come back, we're still not sure.
I think that's getting more and more unlikely as the days go ahead.
And I think, speaking of that, a lot of the eyes of the world of football will be on the Bundesliga this weekend to see what they've done, how they've handled it. You saw all the coaching staff were sat on the bench a couple of meters apart from each other, all with face masks on. The substitutes were by themselves. You even mentioned, hang on, they've had 4 substitutions, completely forgetting that you're now allowed 5.
After discussing it for about 10 minutes on the last episode of the podcast.
People will be looking at that, and maybe the Premier League will be looking at that, about how the Bundesliga have gone about this, because the Premier League, from the outside, it looks like they're really struggling to come to a conclusion about how they're going to start this league. And maybe now that the Bundesliga have got a blueprint, they can pass out to the rest of Europe.
Yeah. The problem with the Premier League, Ed, and you know this, I know this, the listeners know this, is we've mentioned these 6 or 7 teams who really, on their performances over the past 18 months, 2 years, have no right to call themselves Premier League football clubs, are all now chancing their arm and bending the Premier League over the table, saying you can't have relegation. It's not been a normal season. And because they know they're all at risk of going down, they're trying to, like you always say, extend the gravy train of the Premier League money. And I think it's disgusting, because it's tearing at the fabric of English football. You've seen with the Bundesliga today, it can be done. It feels a bit alien for the first 10 minutes, but after that, you're back watching Erling Haaland, Julian Brandt, Thorgan Hazard. Jadon Sancho was on a bench today for Dortmund, and he wasn't even missed. That is how good the attacking threat of Borussia Dortmund was today. And I think I highlighted it on the Paris Saint-Germain Project Rebuild episode we did, of that a bit of a left field, left wing option when Neymar leaves the Parc des Princes would be Rafael Guerreiro for PSG. And I think today's further cemented that for me, because he was just offering an outlet all the time. His positional sense and his awareness of the play around him, particularly when going forward and around that channel on the edge of the box on the left-hand side, was just completely next level.
Yeah, there was that constant overlap, and for a left back, they were 2 fairly accomplished finishes. The first one where he slammed it across the keeper, and then the second one for me where it'll dink on the outside of the foot as he was going the other way.
Yeah, it was a great finish.
I mean, it was that good. You thought it was Thorgan Hazard. I think that's probably
when the graphic flashed up on BT Sport. Rafael Guerreiro scored 2 goals. I was like, no, he's not. He's only scored 1. Hazard's got 2.
I think that's credit enough for that finish for a left back. You got confused with attacking midfielder, but no, yeah, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, it's these players that fly under the radar, that are at elite level clubs across Europe, who the bigger teams should be looking at. It shouldn't always just come down to Neymar or bust or Erling Haaland or bust. You can build teams with players like Rafael Guerreiro and become more of a force in Europe, particularly for Paris. That's why I brought him up in that podcast. But for me today, and like as we expected, Erling Haaland was the star of the show. Just that man's on another level. When he inevitably signs for Real Madrid, that team's going to be unstoppable.
That finish for his goal was fantastically taken. Just almost caressed it into the far corner. And can I mention now, actually, that without the fans there, Dortmund have done something to that net because it makes such a fantastic noise whenever the ball hits it, and you hear it even more prominently now there's no one else there. And it is a lovely noise.
Yeah. The one for Hazard's goal, when he cracked it, and I thought, like, that's rifled into the top corner, and I look at it again, given that the noise it's made, it's just gone effectively straight through the keeper, but hit the back of the net, and it's so crisp when it hits the net. That is just one of those beautiful sounds in football that you wouldn't appreciate if the fans were full in the stadium.
But you still hear it occasionally when, when Haaland scored against PSG. It sounded like thunder had struck the stadium at the time. But
yeah,
it's just one of those things that you appreciate a bit more now that there's no other noise surrounding the stadium.
And I've brought it up a couple of times, but the Schalke goalkeeper performance today, I'm stuttering on my words, but it was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah, it was the kind of performance you want on your first game back. But you think that was down to nerves that he hasn't played very often? It was nerves down to the fact that the situation that it was, and this was the first game back for a while.
Possibly, I could have said that for the second goal when he's just got it caught under his feet and not cleared it properly, and he's knocked it straight to Mahoud Dahoud in central midfield.
Mahoud
and then
Dahoud.
Take your pick there. It's to Guerrero on the left hand side for Julian Brandt, or put it through Haaland in the centre. But for the third one, what are you doing? Just move your feet 3 quick steps to the left and catch it, instead of trying to palm at it. I just really didn't understand that goalkeeping. I was watching him after that, and I felt as though his footwork wasn't up to scratch.
Yeah, I think, and then obviously with the lack of confidence in your keeper, it looked like it definitely spread to the rest of the defence. You mentioned the second goal. Even after he'd failed to get it out of his feet, the defence didn't set properly. I know, it's almost panic stations at that point, but Julian Brandt had that many options. He could have played it through first time to Haaland, who was a good 5-10 yards onside. You had Guerrero, if I said that right, bombing down on the left.
Got it finally.
It was kind of take your pick, which one do you want? And that it became a problem for Schalke for the rest of the game after that.
Yeah, and there was a lot of onus on Jean-Joe Kenny, the Everton loanee at Schalke, on the BT Sport broadcast in England, that he was some established star in this Schalke team, and that he was really kicking on from what we'd seen of his brief performances for Everton in England. But I watched him today, and he was completely all at sea positionally, particularly for the fourth goal. But Guerrero was having a field day with him. He was being drawn in towards Brandt when Brandt was in that pocket, and also couldn't deal with Haaland when he moved out into the channel. And I don't know if I put that on the central midfielders, not really one of them dropping back and picking up the space that Brandt was occupying, or is it on Kenny because he's ball watching effectively and dragging himself in and not sticking as a flat back four?
Does that not come down to the formation, the choice of David Wagner? Because sometimes playing against a team with 3 at the back, that the attacking areas are going to come from the wide areas, because they're always going to have that overlap. But because they had it there all game, there was no change to try and stifle that overlapping run. It was always on. And as a defender, if you're defending 2-on-1 for the entire game, it's just so incredibly difficult to keep holding.
And he's going to get any little mistake or misstep, he's going to get found out, because you're not exactly dealing with slow coaches here on the wing. You got Hakimi on one side and Rafael Guerrero on the other, and you might have a point there that he just probably was just completely confused as to where he should be, who he should be picking up, and that then comes back again to the manager, which we've seen it a lot in the Premier League as well, that managers refuse to change tactics when it's glaringly obvious that Dortmund today were having a field day. There's other examples of that all the way through the season since August, and Jose Mourinho got lambasted at Chelsea and at Manchester United for dragging people off after 20 minutes because the formation wasn't working on the tactics. And I feel as though since the media keep jumping on that train of, a manager can't take someone off after 15 minutes, every manager's scared of changing his tactics.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the defensive midfielders for Schalke weren't helping out by dropping deep. So if you've got Julian Brandt picking up pockets in between the midfield and the defence, you go to the board, you watch the overlapping run, of which now there will be two of them because the defenders haven't picked up the Brandt floating, and it became a problem for them all game, and it's one they never got hold of. And I think that's got to come down to the manager, poor choice of tactics and inability to see the problem and act upon it.
Yeah, and they might make the argument they don't have the players coming off the bench who are capable of understanding the game like Brandt does or Thomas Delaney does, because he really flew under the radar for me today. Delaney, really, really accomplished performance from him coming back from a long-term injury, and it's again having that football nous to pick up space instead of playing off the man. Play the space so you're always giving your teammates an option, and particularly in the last 15 minutes of first half and then carried on into the second half after half time, Dortmund were just passing it around the midfield in triangles for fun, and that again just proves what a cut above that midfield was today. Yeah,
do you think then that we mentioned this when we were talking about Man United and Lask in the Europa League, that the better teams will benefit from the lack of atmosphere because you can't go, say, to an away day and that atmosphere of the smaller team carry that team through? Because we were mentioning it that about 80 minutes into this game it was 4-0 to Dortmund, so Schalke weren't really that bothered in trying to pull the game back because they knew they weren't going to. Dortmund were fairly happy with it being 4 and weren't they weren't looking for 5, but obviously if it came about they weren't going to turn it down. And it was just a case of, without almost those 5, if the Dortmund fans were there, they probably would have pushed for 5 and 6 to really hammer home the victory in the derby.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying there, and it was very evident when the substitutions started to happen for both Schalke and Dortmund. It was a case of, you're really bringing me on. There's nothing really to play for. And I think Jadon Sancho epitomised that because he didn't really offer anything when he came on, apart from making the defensive error near the corner flag with about 5 minutes to go that he ultimately remedied himself alongside Haaland. But I just feel as though that's the bit you're going to have to get used to with football like it is at the moment, is once the game's gone, it's not really a watchable spectacle at 4-0 down after 75 minutes.
Yeah, that might be the biggest change. But what you mentioned, Jadon Sancho, the one thing I think he offered me was proof that he in fact had been following the social distancing laws because he needed a haircut. But it was amazing me that a lot of these players' hair, and this is really weird, looked a lot better than mine does after 8 weeks. I was amazed. They must have all had haircuts at some point.
I can imagine Borussia Dortmund have found a way to bring in a barber so then they can trim up the hair of all the players, same for Schalke. And you can imagine, because Jadon Sancho has his own barber back in England, who he flies over to Dortmund, he's just like, nah, no one's touching my Barnet until I can get my own guy in.
My Barnet's a mess. So I was expecting to see 22 mops run around on the pitch, not one of them knowing where they're going because the hair's over their eyes. I know for a while that I've played sport with long hair before and I can't see where I'm going.
It made me feel a bit bad because my hair's descended into a microphone. And looking at these guys who've had the same lack of hairdressers for the past 8-10 weeks, I'm just like, what am I doing wrong here?
They're definitely doing something. But to wrap it up then, what did you make of BT Sport's coverage of the game? Because I was impressed and surprised actually. They were A, in the studio, and B, you mentioned it as well, the clarity of Owen Hargreaves doing the analysis from his home. Yeah,
it's slick as ever, what you expect with BT Sport. I think they've always, since he got the Champions League licence or rights, have offered a more slick broadcast, particularly in the studio. The commentary, you can take it or miss it. You can take it or leave it for me. Today, Paul Dempsey and Steve McManaman did a good job. You could tell they weren't in the stadium and they weren't in the same room, because when they were doing the plugs for what games are coming on next on BT Sport, McManaman was talking over Paul Dempsey, but I thought the commentators did a phenomenal job in the circumstances. And with James Richardson and Ralph Hoggenstein, I'm going to get his name 100% right, in the studio, they did what you expected from seasoned broadcasters. But like you've just said about Owen Hargreaves, shined a light on what a Sky Sports playing at, particularly Gary Neville and Jamie Carragher on every day at 9 a.m. with a football show live. That they can have Owen Hargreaves at full crystal clear clarity with an earpiece in. Yet Sky Sports' top media pundits are using Apple AirPods on some grainy picture.
Yeah, we discussed this, didn't we? We asked, like, why have they not sent them broadcast packages? And just to see Owen Hargreaves kitted out, obviously BT must have sent him some kind of, maybe even a camera and a microphone to go along with it to kind of keep that parity between the quality in the studio and out of the studio. So I was very impressed with that action, and obviously the camera. I was expecting there to only be like one camera in the stadium, if I'm being honest, almost up top bird's eye view. But no, they had all the cameras and stuff were there in the stadium. German television broadcasting that, which was good. Made it feel a bit more normal when you were getting replays, and different angles and stuff like that, which I thought was a good touch.
And I think, particularly with all the eyes being on the Bundesliga and German football at this time, a lot of people are going to wise up and see how slick BT Sports broadcasts are compared to Sky Sports, and hopefully it makes Sky Sports up the game.
Possibly. It'd be interesting to see how they do it if and when the Premier League returns. But it was good to see some football. It was
Aidan.
The game's tomorrow?
Yeah, it's Union Berlin and Bayern Munich tomorrow. We've got Frankfurt and Borussia Mönchengladbach at 4:45 tonight, which definitely will be on.
Yes, it's good to have it back. It was good to watch some football. It was good to talk about some football after 8 long weeks of speculation and talking about if buts and maybes. We've got a game to talk about, and
yeah, I feel as though we just got to the bottom of the barrel in terms of doing a project rebuild on Everton, which we will get to next week.
But we've been saved.
Sorry for the delay on that.
We have been saved,
but we've been saved, and I just think today it was just an absolute privilege to watch Erling Haaland, because that kid's phenomenal, really is.
Yeah, he is good, and I look forward to seeing him in white sometime very, very soon. But on that note, I think we'll leave that one there. This instant replay. Obviously, we should be back with more instant replays of more Bundesliga games as the season continues, and who knows when La Liga and the Premier League kick back in, we'll be back with that as well.
Yeah, just give us your thoughts, opinions on what the broadcast was like for you today. Did you feel watching a game with no fans? Did you see anything that really stood out as being different? I didn't really see that much myself. I don't know about you, Aidan.
No, I was just thoroughly enamoured with the fact that football was back. I think by the time the game was going again, I was just pleased it was there.
So and if you see any future games in the German League that you want us to cover on an instant replay, just hit us up in the comments on YouTube, tweet us at the Twitter MatchDay_review, leave us a comment on MatchDayReview.com, and we look forward to watching Bayern Munich and Union Berlin tomorrow.
Yes, we'll be back with that one tomorrow as well. It's been a pleasure to talk to you, Lewis, and thank God football is back.